Cool. Okay, so we are Flamingo, and my name, and where am I pointing this thing? Oh, here. There we go. We're good. Excuse me. My name is George Webster, and I am part of the Flamingo Futures team. And we specialize in trends and foresight, and really kind of understanding the direction in which culture is moving, with a particular view on today, I suppose, outlining some of the tools that we feel can speak to bigger approaches that you guys can take away and perhaps apply in your daily work moving forward. Now, this image, you're probably thinking, wondering what the bloody hell this thing is. Well, our kind of furry friends here are a bacteria called Prevotella, which is a gut microbiome famed for its capability in improving physical performance. Now, we came across this gut microbiome doing a fascinating study exploring the future of well-being very recently. And one of our LA-based participants at the kind of apex of well-being culture talked us through an activity she'd been engaging with, something called poop doping. Poop doping is a very interesting activity, and one that involves ingesting another individual's fecal matter into one's own system in order to improve physiological function. Now, you're probably thinking, why the hell is this guy talking about poo and bacteria, and is there a commercial application here? Well, yes, there is, and I'd like to start by saying that we found this indicator, what we call an indicator of change at Flamingo, through a really zoomed out approach. And this is one of our kind of first foundational principles of looking big, looking beyond brand, looking beyond category, looking across culture, and picking up insights from semiotic practices, from the work that Lucas does, from the work that we do within the futures practice. But ultimately, it's about zooming out. Now, this is one indicator which sits at the top of this pyramid here. And this kind of will talk through the way we do trends at Flamingo. Now, take, for example, poop doping as one indicator. Now, if we just take the frame of well-being, we might think about some other indicators that we're constantly tracking. It might be the advances in plasma transfusion, taking the plasma from young individuals and injecting them into older individuals, that elixir of youth to rejuvenate individuals who are in their older years to supreme health. Or the advances in grey matter technology, the possibility of improving cognitive functioning perhaps beyond our years. Now, there's a thread running here, and I think what we do at Flamingo Futures, and I think this is something that you guys can take away, is really look at the thematic patterns that join the dots between these indicators. Look at what we would call the trend. Now, biohacking, of course, is one big thing here, but what we feel is perhaps slightly more interesting as a take is this idea of sustained optimization, which we would argue is perhaps moving away from an idea of managing our decline into ill health to inverting that curve, perpetual betterment. And ultimately, what we feel is important to acknowledge are the driving forces that basically give rise to this trend. Now, these could be kind of numerous, but to pull two out and to give you a sense of how this pyramid really is fully structured, one might be the cult of the individual, the doctrine of individualism that's kind of very much pervasive in society today, or the idea of self-quantification, the fact that we are constantly able to consciously track every heartbeat, every movement, and the ideas of limitless potential of optimization, of improving our lives ever more that arises from that. But ultimately, I think what's really, really incredibly rich about the work we do at Futures, within the broader context of Flamingo, is when we partner with individuals like Lucas within his practice of digital forensics. Lucas's work could get us, through his linguistic modeling and his digital tracking, which he'll talk you through, could get us to that poop doping indicator. Or it could allow us to explore the idea of sustained optimization even deeper. But ultimately, it allows us to do a number of things really, which gives really rich and deep insight. One, a sense of size and scale of something like sustained optimization. And two, a sense of whether or not something is growing or shrinking. And three, whether or not such a phenomenon is actually related to and talking to behavior that's actually happening and being talked about online. So, to hand over to Lucas.
Thank you. 5 minutes is a very short time to talk about all of this stuff, but I do want to say that George picked the topic, not me. So basically, we're going to talk about tools, and that's all very good, but the first thing that we must realize as analysts is that no tool is going to come and save the day, right? Like that ultimately there is no replacement, no amount of technology is ever going to substitute, forward thinking and actually humility about the data that we handle. So that's very important. The other thing that I kind of want to say is basically that, well, 5 minutes is not going to be enough. So we're going to talk about linguistic modeling and digital tracking. Linguistic modeling is really something that came along, has been around for a long time. It's really the processing of large amounts of data, human language data, into something that a human can process. I remember during the early 2000s, I worked a lot with clients who were getting into the dashboard game and very quickly realized that you were just seeing, I got 10,000 tweets, I now have 15,000 tweets. What's the meaning of that? And it's quite a lot of paralysis that comes from such large amounts of data. What we need to start doing is building tools that allow us to structure that data and actually make some sense of it. So for my sense, I'm going to try a live demo here of some of this stuff, but in the context of poop doping. So what we have here is a linguistic model of runners. It's basically about 5 million conversations over time. And I've mixed in some of the data, but what it shows you is that algorithmically we can start seeing some of the patterns in the way that runners might speak. Here in the middle, every single one of these spheres represents a concept that they're talking about. So they talk about the location that they run, or very soberingly, they talk about temperature. And we can see the pattern of heat, for example. Every summer, every runner is like, it's very hot, and every winter it's like, it's very cold. It's a sobering thought. We can see, over here, what kind of apparel they talk about. It's not surprising to see Adidas or Asics, right? And we might be navigating this and find ourselves within the medical cluster, see the types of injuries that they come upon, and find things like biohacking, and see that in the last year, biohacking is particularly hot, and eventually even come across the concept of poop doping. I should say that it's such a novel concept that you've come up with that it was kind of difficult. There were only so many conversations, but typical to the internet, you have that balance of like people going like, I want to learn what poop doping is, and then people saying, I hate you, kill yourself. So I've tried to sort of limit it as best as possible. The other thing I wanted to talk to you guys is digital tracking. I've done a lot of work both with companies that rely heavily on algorithmic prediction of human behavior, and sort of there's always that feeling that you're not fully understanding what humans are doing. And then I've done some qual work in the past, and I always wanted a little bit more out of truth, a little bit more of an approach about the underlying volition and process and rationale by which people make decisions. And today, we can layer technology over practices that are still incredibly relevant. No one's saying that qualitative research or human understanding is no longer valuable, but we can add a layer of data in order to understand them a bit better. So what we do in Flamingo is we combine these methods, right? So we have our prompted research where you're directly asking someone, how do you feel about this? Ethnography, which is self-reported behavior. We might ask someone to keep a diary every time they wash their hair. What product did they use? I don't know why I went with that. I have no hair, but yes. And then digital tracking, which is really the act of tracking someone through their digital devices. Now, this is anonymized fake data that I've spliced together, but this might be a runner that we're looking at. We can see through their tracking data where they go. We can even see that they listen to iTunes on their commute, right? So you can see it highlighted there in green. And for every commute, it lights up in red. You can see them like going to work and coming back. And we say to ourselves, well, how are they tracking their running? You see Strava here. They use it quite a lot of time. And then there's a block of Strava followed by some internet searching. So maybe this person was like, I want to be better. I might need to do some poop doping. I don't know. And we can see what sort of searches that is. That's a search for biohacking. And then they might even come across this spike over here of TED.com conversation, right? And we can see how that might lead them to a conversation by Ellen Jorgensen about biohacking. So again, by getting very close to a human's data and really understanding that additional to the kind of questions that we might ask, we can get very close indeed to understanding something, and even something as abstract as the concept that George has picked. So yeah, thank you. That's it in 5 minutes.
So yeah, ultimately that's a bit of a kind of a whistle-stop tour, so to speak, of how our two specialisms can come together. But I think there's some key tools or approaches that you guys might kind of take away from this. One, zooming in. Looking at these kind of micro indicators that are kind of signals of cultural change and analysing them in a really kind of deep way. But in order to get to them, zooming out, thinking big and thinking really expansively about what is going on in the world. Cultural change happens from absolutely everywhere. Linguistic modeling, of course, that Lucas has talked through, the ability to look at kind of the conversation happening online, the associations of linguistic concepts, and then applying an understanding, a layer of cultural meaning on top of that. Digital tracking, understanding behavior being exhibited in real time, and understanding the meaning of why people are doing the things that they're doing. But ultimately, it's how all of these things come together that we feel is kind of the richest way that Flamingo can deliver cultural insight. So thank you.